In the previous video, we made an animation of our cars driving along our bridge. But this scene's still just a little boring. Like right now, all we have is 3 cars moving and a bridge, and it's all floating in empty space. So we need some sort of world for this scene to live in. To do this, we're going to go ahead and make a terrain, some ground around the bridge, and extend our scene to where this makes more sense. So let's start with some terrain. I'm going to start by creating a polygon plane. Of course, this is really small and at the center of our grid, so I'll scale this up to where we can see it, and I'll lower it down to where it's a little bit below our bridge. Now, it's kind of hard to see this because it's all the same color as our bridge, so I'm going to also go ahead and apply a new material to it. If I right-click on the plane and go to Assign New Material, I'll go ahead and add a Lambert material because this doesn't necessarily need to be glossy or have any reflection. So you'll see we have a new Lambert 3 material. I will name this Ground, MAT for ground material. And I'll go ahead and change my color to green and sort of play around until I find a green that feels a little bit more like grass. There we go, that should do it. Now, this ground plane is way too small. I can still see the edge of the world, and what we're trying to do is maintain the illusion that the world continues forever. We just can't see it, right? So let's go ahead and make this really big. Okay, that way it's far off in the distance. We can still see the ground terrain. Now, if we were to just start moving vertices in here, this is going to look pretty simple, right? It's very geometric and not very realistic looking. So the reason for that is this plane just needs more detail. Currently, we only have 10 faces by 10 faces. So let's just create more. I could insert edge loops, but that would take a long time. If I go to my channel box and go to the inputs, polyplane 1, I'm just going to up my subdivisions for my width and height from 10 to something higher like 100. So now you'll see I have more information on this polygon plane to manipulate and get some of the shapes I want. However, if I just grabbed a vertex now, I still have that same issue. There's just more detail to it. So I need to be able to manipulate multiple vertices at a time. To do this, we're going to learn 2 new tools. The first one is actually just an attribute of our move tool. So if I were to press the B key, B as in boy, you'll see that now I get a large highlighted region around my selected vertex. And if I move that single vertex, it's going to affect a large region of the polygon plane. Now your selected region may be bigger or smaller than this, and we can dynamically change the selected region just by holding down the B key again and clicking our left mouse button and dragging from side to side. You'll see we get this circle that changes sizes and allows us to change the fall off radius of our soft select. So that's what this is called, is soft select. There are several other attributes for this, and we can find those in the Tools menu. If I go to the top right-hand corner of my user interface, above my channel box and attribute editor, there's this button that has a hammer on it. And if I click that, it'll open up our tool settings. These are the settings for whatever tool you're currently using. And you'll see right now, I'm in the Move tool. If I were in the Rotate tool, we would have a different set of settings. So let's go ahead and just stick to the Move tool. And you'll see lower down here, we have this Soft Selection tab. And if I open that up, you'll see that there's a lot of different options for that, including fall off radius. So I can also adjust that fall off radius here. And I can adjust the way that radius falls off. And right now I'll just go ahead and leave this with a standard fall off curve. So I'm going to go ahead and mount my Tools menu just over here on this side so I have it open because we're going to use it again later. So again, holding B, I can change this fall off radius dynamically. And I can kind of quickly go through here and just grab individual vertices and change my radius, and start getting a little bit more of a dynamic looking terrain behind my bridge. And so now, if we're looking at our bridge from this perspective, then the world looks a little more realistic. There are also a couple of other ways that we can manipulate this mesh to create more organic shapes. If we go to our shelf, you'll see that right beside poly modeling, we have sculpting. The sculpting tools will allow us to make changes to our models in a more intuitive way. So if I sort of get around here where I can see my terrain a little bit better. So if I choose the first tool on this shelf, the sculpt tool, while I have my terrain selected, it will allow us to start painting deformation onto this terrain. You'll see that as I click and drag my mouse, areas within the brush region start to raise. Again, holding B, I can resize this brush to get a smaller brush. And if I hold Shift, I can smooth elements of this away. So let's imagine I painted something really jagged, and then I made my brush a little bit bigger. I could hold Shift to kind of smooth that out and retain some of that deformation, but make it a little bit more even. So again, Shift will smooth. If I hold Control, it will do the opposite of what our brush normally does. Instead of pulling the mesh upward, it will carve into the surface of our model. And so this will allow us to make little grooves and pits throughout our scene that will slowly start to feel more like an organic terrain. Now that's just using the sculpt tool. We have several other tools here. We have the smooth tool. We have the grab tool. The grab tool will allow you to just grab sections of the model and pull up on them. And again, if I make my brush bigger, it allows me to grab a bigger region. So this is good for quick manipulation. And we also have a tool that I personally like further down here, the knife tool. The knife tool will allow you to make sharper cuts into your model. So if you wanted to make some rivers, so let's raise our strength a little bit here so you can see it better. Then you can get a little bit of a sharper cut into the scene. So what I'm doing right now is trying to dig out some areas to make this feel a little bit more organic, like mountains. I'll smooth some of that. There we go. To get out of the sculpting tool, all we have to do is activate a different tool. So if I hit W or Q, it will deactivate the sculpting tool, and I can go back to manipulating my model in the regular ways with the translates, rotates, and scales. So I'm going to raise my scene just a little bit, and I'm going to go ahead and use this opportunity to extend my roadway and my bridge a little further, just to build out this scene a little more. So one of the things I can do is lower these posts and maybe scale them up a little bit, so it feels like it's going into the ground. And then I can open the outliner to select all of the parts of the bridge, and we're going to group these by hitting Control G. That puts all of my objects inside of a single group or parent node. I can name this Original Bridge. And the cool thing about this is now I can duplicate this group and replicate my bridge throughout my scene. So just selecting the group node, I'm going to hit Control D to duplicate, and it will not only duplicate the original bridge node, it will duplicate all of the objects underneath it. And so now I can move my duplicate bridge node to start duplicating my bridge throughout the scene.